This is a reading from the Autobiography of Maria Valtorta. Mario went back to his studies. I might say to his final exams at that point. I approached, unaware, a misfortune which was the source of other misfortunes. I was beginning to be really well. I still had much palpitation of the heart, but had gained weight and recovered energy. The physician was content. On March 17th, I went out with Mother to go and thank a very elderly woman friend of ours, a granny who was fond of me, and had given me a present for my 23rd birthday on March 14th. On the way back, near my house, as I walked, giving my arm to Mother who, on account of her notably altered vision, trips over every little projection and falls, I was struck in the back by a small delinquent, the son of a communist and our milliner. With an iron bar taken from a bed he had taken up from behind, and while shouting, "Down with the rich and the military," gave me a blow with all his might. The noise was such that Mother thought he had thrown a stone and that it had ricocheted, striking against the pavement. Instead, it was the sound of the iron on my vertebras. Note that because of my heart trouble, I did not wear a corset, and thus lacked even that protection. I felt such an intense pain that I knelt on the ground. My legs could not hold me up. With effort, I then managed to get to my feet and drag myself home. When I was undressed, a marked contusion was visible in the area of my kidneys. From the spine to the liver, I had a red, nearly excoriated mark. They prepared compresses which relieved the pain. I perhaps, or rather certainly, erred in not wanting a doctor immediately, but I did not think I had been so dangerously struck. I had never been a coward about misfortune. Like my father, I have instead even been too stoical in physical maladies. Friday and Saturday went by. Besides the suffering from the area affected by the blow, which hurt if I touched it or rested on my back while in bed, I also had strange distress, dizziness, a glittering in front of my eyes, intense nausea, and a deep, deep weariness. I was on my feet, though, just the same, from 9 until the evening. On Sunday morning I went to church and received communion, with great effort, for it was most painful for me to kneel. Mother tried to get the foods I liked best, as I did not manage to nourish myself. Everything repelled me. At noon I ate a quarter of a roast pigeon, and nothing else. In the afternoon the woman friend who had advised me about Mario, another woman, Mother, and I were out to go see an exposition. I tried to remain at home, and Mother, it is true, did not force me to go out. Rather, she wanted to stay at home with me, but the other two insisted. It was not far to go, and it would do me good. So we left. I dragged myself along with difficulty and stopped at all the benches I found. I had nothing for dinner. I retired immediately, wearier than ever, and slept. At 3 a.m. I was awakened by such an atrocious pain that I had never again experienced its equal. And I have certainly been having so many tremendous pains for so long. I had the sensation that a kidney or something else was breaking away from its ligaments and tumbling towards the groin. But what a pain! What a pain! I became a ball, entirely bathed in cold sweat, contracted and retching. I could not speak, move, or cry out. I was dying. My little dog, who was sleeping on his bed in a corner of the room, became aware of it and started to howl. He saved me, for Mother rushed in, Father rushed in, and they called the woman friend and a doctor. He was the owner of the building and lived on the ground floor. With timely assistance, I came out of the agony, but a very high fever set in. I think it was produced by an abscess in the kidney, which on breaking poisoned my blood, for I had attacks of septicemia. At the hospital, I had occasion to become familiar with the phases of septic fever, which goes through a minimum temperature amidst irrepressible shivers to a maximum several times a day. I say I think so, because none of the doctors or consultants understood anything about it. Some said one thing, and others another. Internal and external examinations did not arrive at the hoped-for result of a diagnosis. 3 months in bed, with fevers reaching 40 degrees, intense sufferings, 3 times nearly killed by mistaken treatments, attacking my still weak heart and bringing me close to cardiac arrest. But no one understood anything. No one suspected that the real patient was the spinal canal. They realized 14 years later. And Mario? Mario, advised by his father, was completely in a dither. With great difficulty, in my endless nights, I wrote to tell him that I wasn't really so ill. Seeing my letters was what convinced him that I was not seriously sick. I thus wrote to him and gave the letters to the colonel for him to mail, or to our woman friend. At night I was alone, for I never wanted to be looked after, and could therefore write my reassuring notes. I was so ill, however, that I, more than anyone else, and then all the others, including the doctors, really thought that I would necessarily die. Was I sorry about it? Not at all. It must have been my great weakness, or the idea that death resolved everything, even the now approaching struggle to obtain the freedom to love, or a special grace of God, or the will of God, or whatever it was. The fact is that I was resigned, even more than resigned, content to feel my end approaching. I seemed to be floating on a placid river, carrying me gently along. At its mouth was eternity. I cannot say I thought as I do now, with an intensity which is nearly vision. There is God who is waiting for me. No, but I thought that eternal day which was approaching would give me peace, for I had already reached the point of hoping deeply in the mercy of God. When a soul deeply hopes in the Lord, it is already far advanced on the way of salvation. The idea of God's mercy brings with it confidence, gratitude, tranquility, love, and humility. One acknowledges having been at fault, and this keeps one in holy humility, a virtue necessary for God to work in a soul. We are tranquil, for if it is true that we recall our faults, we are comforted, however, by the idea that God is he who wants mercy and not sacrifice, and that it is his merciful love he forgives, and that in his merciful love he forgives and absolves us if we cry out to him our hope of absolution. We are grateful, for how could we fail to be with such a benign Father who is ready to forgive us even before we think of asking for his forgiveness? Just like a good father who is grieved at the sins of a son, but in his love forgives them and looks forward to the joy of the hour in which his son will say to him, "Father, I am not worthy to be called your son," for then the good father will be able to give him the kiss of peace, which he is burning to give. We are trustful, for when we know we must present ourselves to one who is good, we are always confident. And here we know we are presenting ourselves to the good one par excellence. All of these things generate love, because love attracts and generates love. And what love could we find greater than God's? In short, love predisposes our souls to ever greater humility, tranquility, gratitude, and trust. These are virtues which complete each other and set in motion our soul's ascent, as the different wheels in a clock set its hands in motion. Even now, after 23 years, I remember that time as a great period of great resignation. Now, my conscious love for the cross and for the God of the cross is much greater, but precisely because my love has now reached the summit, beyond which one can rise no higher without being burned by the blaze of charity, the summit upon which we taste pain as the greatest joy and see the truth in all its fullness, and, as a host with the host and a host for the host, place ourselves voluntarily on the cross, crying out with the Jacopone of Todi, "O cross, I hang myself and cling to you, that I may taste life by dying. For you I want to agonize. Love, that I may be with you. Love, please make me die of love." Precisely because of all this, I no longer need resignation. It has been absorbed by love. I do not, therefore, resign myself to suffering and dying, but must ask God for the grace to resign myself to living and not suffering, because to me death is life, pain is joy, and I fear nothing except being unnailed from my cross. I have asked for it and have received it. On it I want to remain, and on it die, and with it, as my coat of arms, I want to enter heaven. Maria Valtorta has been dead for years. Now Maria of the Cross exists. It is my domain, my crown of nobility, my wealth, and all the royal palaces on earth, all the domains, wealth, and crowns are nothing to me, such a nothing that I don't even look at it. Alongside this holy wood, this wealth of wounds, this blood purple, this domain composed of a scaffold, this crown made of thorns, this agony made of song and reparation, this all, such an all that I always keep my gaze fixed upon it with jealous care, and clasp it tightly to myself with even more jealous concern, so that my treasure will not be taken from me. Jesus tells me, as we suffer together on the wood, don't be frightened of what you must still suffer. Be faithful until death, and I shall give you the crown of life. Keep what you have, so that no one will take your crown. And looking into his loving eyes, kissing him on his divine lips, drinking his tears, feeding on his blood, keeping my heart beats in time with his, heart against heart, I reply, yes, Lord, my God, my Redeemer, my King and Master, yes, my love, with your grace, I will be faithful until death. Thank you for your joy of suffering. I was so ill that the colonel thought it proper to give his son the final joy of seeing me once more. That fine man must have thought, if Maria dies, my son will have had the last satisfaction of being able to say goodbye. If she survives, this is the time to wring consent out of her mother. She is so prostrate that she won't react. Poor thing, he deluded himself, and to such an extent. The good man spoke to mother in the sitting room, and then came to me glorious and triumphant, sure that he had resolved everything. He caressed me with real fatherly affection, and whispered, be happy and get well. Everything's settled. Ah, indeed, when he had left, mother came. She did not assail me with reproaches, and that was a great deal with her character, but she broke up everything. She told me that she was not opposed in all respects, but that after an illness like this one, she wanted to see if I really got better before giving her consent. Was I convinced she was acting correctly? I replied that I was. Exhausted as I was, it sufficed for her not to torture me with one of her usual scenes, and after all, her proposal was proper, so I replied that I was. Then she said she would write Mario and also arrange everything with the colonel, and so on and so forth. Was that all right? Yes, fine. I was touched by such unexpected sweetness, and with my limited strength, thanked the Lord interiorly for it. Tears were streaming down my face, tears of weakness, joy, and gratitude. Mother said, now, though you must tell me frankly what point you two are at, how you have managed to right each other when you came to an agreement, and who exhorted you to continue. I reproach no one, but I want sincerity. I was too legitimate. Don't you think so? With the psalmist, I too say, I had faith and thus spoke, but have been humiliated beyond measure. For even more than in the case of my assistant superior, who had had harsh words, I then had to say that all were deceitful with me. Footnote 1, Psalm 116, verses 10 to 11. But I opened myself to mother, and with what fruit? I don't know exactly what she said to the colonel, who came the next day, but from what I was able to glean afterwards, she used my name to say that I wanted to be left in peace, and authorized her to act in my place, to communicate with Mario, judging that it was fitting to do so, now more than ever, given my condition, which might leave after effects, and Mario was liquidated. The colonel wanted to speak to me, but mother prevented him in the fiercest way. You observe that I still have the permanent honor of maternal surveillance when someone is with me. I feel like a prison inmate in the parlotory, being watched by the jailers. But now I'm on the ground floor, and sometimes manage to speak to people privately. Then I was on the third floor, in an apartment whose door was always locked and bolted. Mother never left me alone, and never left the house, so I could not see the colonel any more. He, too, was liquidated. The third one to be liquidated was the woman friend in whom Mario and I had confided. A ferocious scene, and everything ended by throwing that woman out forever. Fourth was that woman's friend, out of fear that she would act as an intermediary, and so on. Except for the doctor, I no longer saw anyone, for mother advised everyone that I no longer received people. That caused a lot of gossip in the neighborhood, not the least of which was the statement that I was expecting a child. When I got up after 3 months, because I wanted to get up, though I still had high fevers and pains, after only 8 days, mother took me to Montecatini. We had sold a house in Viareggio in 1918, and in addition, Viareggio was excessively frequented by common friends of Mario's and ours. To Montecatini, then, with the excuse of giving me a change of air while she took the waters. but the truth was that she certainly could not keep me enclosed forever in the apartment, and in July, Mario, now an officer, was coming to Florence on leave. In Montecatini, she also wanted me to undergo heaven knows what sort of witchcraft to remove Mario from my heart. There are certain things Mother does believe in, but I rebelled. I am desperately afraid of such arts. We stayed at Montecatini 50 days, the time needed to be sure that Mario had now embarked and his father had gone to the Salso Maggiore mud baths or some other spa. I had to stay shut in at home for the remaining days until September 20th, the days we left for Reggio Calabria. Farther than that, Mother had never accepted her relative's invitation to go there, but now it proved convenient, and she had us leave. Florence was now propitious for her game. Father might encounter Mario or the colonel, and my father obeyed his wife as long as she was present. Later, even without wanting to, he would forget her exhortations and say what she had required him not to say. I could not remain a recluse forever, so away with all of us, something which gave further credit to the talk that I was to have a child. Humanly speaking, I tell you that it would have been better. I would have had my baby, and then Mother, in the face of this reality, would have put down her despotism forever. Wouldn't it have seemed proper to her for me to marry Mario in that case? So we left without leaving anyone our address. Only the owner of the house, the doctor, had it because of taxes. But Mother felt this old man could be trusted. From March 17th on, I had thus stuck my nose out the door only to leave at dawn for Montecatini and to leave for Reggio Calabria at 11 p.m. When we returned from Montecatini, it was 10 p.m. I can thus say that from March 17th on, I no longer saw the streets and people of Florence. In Calabria, we arrived in Reggio Calabria on October 10th, 1920. We had stopped in Rome, Naples, and Caserta for a few days. In Reggio, in my cousin's vast hotels, I found much to distract me from the burning pain in my heart. We lived in the Villa Hotel, an immense shanty town. The city was just starting to rise again from the 1908 earthquake, spread out over a huge estate. There was a citrus grove, an almond grove, an orchard, fields of beans, artichokes, fennels, peas, and so on, and gardens galore. In addition, lovelier than all else, a promenade which led along the orange grove to a refreshment booth set upon the spur of a hill that slid down amidst the throng of prickly pears. It was a wonderful place. It dominated the straits and mountains of Calabria completely. The city spread out at our feet. This is a picture of the former buvette of the Belfanti brothers in Reggio Calabria above, destroyed in the 1908 earthquake. Giovanni Battista Belfanti's hotel, known as the Centralino, on the Reggio Calabria seafront below. It had been built together with Giuseppe Belfanti's hotel villa, known as the Centrale, after the 1908 earthquake. And on the overleaf, Giuseppe above and Giovanni Battista Belfanti below, cousins of Maria Valtorta's brother. And on the postcard is written, I'll try to read it, alla mia cara Maria, perché tengo sempre vicino a lui questa brutta copia del mio muso. E, can't get that word, figlia, fria, meglio, corrispondere, e, can't read the last three words, September 1942, Giuseppe. So he says to my dear Maria, because so she may keep a picture of my ugly mug close to her. You can see. The other one says, a Peppino, Iside, Maria, carissimi, affettuosamente, Battista Belfanti. So to Peppino, Iside, Maria, very dear and very affectionately, Battista Belfanti. It was my favorite place. I would go there with my dog and a book, pretending to read, but all I did was look at the sea, over which warships often passed, in addition to merchant steamships, and I thought of Mario. Perhaps he was on those ships, and did not know that his beloved was invoking him with all her heart from that height. When he had been torn from me, what had he done? What had he thought? Had he imagined that it was all a plot by Mother, and that I had been utterly prevented from speaking and acting, as if bound and gagged by highwaymen? Or did he regard me as a lunatic, a wicked person, someone who broke her word? These questions nagged at my heart and mind day and night, as many woodworms gnaw at a piece of wood, until causing it to crumble. You may wonder, but couldn't you write even then? At a hotel, so many things can be done more freely than in a house. Yes, I could have written. I could have done so many things. Even rebel, saying, I am of age and do as I think best, and what it is legitimate to do, for it is something honest. But, and on this basis decide whether I have or have not been an obedient and respectful daughter, I was unable to disobey and offend my mother. I did my duty even then. I carried out my sacrifice even then. Among other things, I was so shattered that I vegetated without energy. I lived only the inner life intensely. Within, there was a whole working of memories, thoughts, regrets, quite different, though, from the ones which had exploded after that ill-omened January 5th, 1914, the origin of all the thorns which came later. For if my mother had not then dashed our legitimate desire, I would have been married for some time. Roberto, who was not bound to military service, the only son of a widowed mother, would not have enlisted as a volunteer and would not have died. I would have been in Bari with him. Mario would not have fallen in love with me. I would not have had all those moral sufferings, the heart trouble, the spinal lesion. Now I suffered greatly, but it was a pain free from every fever of sense, a holy pain, devoid of any rebellious impulse. The first pain had detached me from God and from the law of God, throwing me into the dust. The second, great, even greater pain, which reopened all the wounds time had healed, and reopened them through the action of the same maternal hand, which, unchanging over the years, destroyed my joy for the sake of her convenience, took me entirely back to God, and joined me to him. I had no other affection left in the world capable of satiating my soul. Father was increasingly a child, dominated by Mother. Mother was my enemy. I no longer had Mario. The sisters had rejected me. Other good friends had thrown me out of the house. There was nothing, no one else. Only God remained to act as my father, mother, husband, friend, and master. I wept at his feet, spoke to him, sought consolation from him, and humbly asked him to take me by the hand and lead me along the way which was most pleasing to him. For I was lost, and understood that on my own I could never find the way destined for me by his will. In a short time, my mother, with her authoritarian manner, had attracted the antipathies of everyone, servants, clients, and her own relatives. Her cousins, for they are my mother's first cousins, had told her several times in no uncertain terms that was no way to act with her husband, her daughter, and the employees. Imagine, my mother has never wanted criticism from anyone. Whoever offers it becomes a very fierce enemy for her. There had already been scuffles then, and we had not even been there for 2 months. At the end of November, there was a sharper one than usual, and as a result, my other cousin wanted me with him at the other hotel. It is necessary to know that many of the disputes had originated from the fact that my cousins, Giuseppe, Amelide, Emma, and Normanna, did not share Mother's way of thinking and acting in regard to me. Then the other cousins, Battista and Clotilde, had wanted me with them. I was with Mother for fewer hours, and she had fewer occasions to exercise her absolute sovereignty. It was thus hoped that there would be fewer disputes in this connection. So around 8 in the morning, I would go down to the other hotel towards the sea, and come back up to the villa hotel at 8 in the evening or later. In this way, except for the night hours, I was distant. I was sorry for my father, but he had found many pastimes in Reggio, and was also happier. Another regret was that I was no longer able to stroll through the estate and go to my well-loved refreshment stand, from which I could see so much sky and sea, and be isolated amidst flowering plants and the singing of birds. I was sorry, finally, because I was no longer surrounded by my restless, dear little cousins, aged 3 to 6, 3 fidgety creatures who had grown quite fond of me. But one cannot have everything at once. With Clotilde, the one who had accompanied me to Monza, I got along very well. I really got on well with everyone, for I know how to adapt to the ideas of others. Accustomed to living with Mother, I found living with others easy in all other places. I spent 20 months of serenity. I took care of Memo, a dear lad aged 10, the only child left, helping him to study. I felt as though I had gone back to 1913 when I tended to Mario's studies. I went out with Memo for lovely sallies in a carriage or on foot. I kept Clotilde company, worked with her. She was very good at embroidery and lace, and read. Clotilde had a fine collection of books. She is a highly cultured woman, and thus knows how to select the best in books as well, for style and plot. I told you that the good Lord had availed himself of every means to instruct me in his law, and bear me to himself by a special gift. From childhood on, he preserved me from certain forms of curiosity, which the conversation of adults could have whetted in me, as I previously related to you. Later, at the hospital, he gave me such perfect balance that in my wounded patients I never saw a man, but always poor, sick children. By means of creatures and events, he took me back to the faithful, beautiful faith of my early youth, after the fierce storm occurring between the ages of 16 and 20. So now, making use of books, and especially one book, he finished the work of attracting me to himself.